went over the second chapter, and the second chapter, it was it had several topics. Actually, it was covering a lot of different aspects, including probability, including the image composition, how the image is composed, and also how many bits an image can be, how we move let's say an object by using the certain transformations. And another important aspect, it was also the principle of the moments of the distribution of pixel intensities. So that was also an essential aspect, which included mean, standard deviation, and many other different kurtosis, skewness, and they constituted the moments of the data distribution. We covered interpolation, which was an important aspect, and interpolation, which is a principle which we have covered in the numerical analysis, which involves the determining, or let's say it this way, given a few data points which are at sometimes they can be equidistant from each other. Interpolation, it is defined as defining a data point between the original data points that were provided, which in this case it would be any representation. But let me have a look at what part of the screen I'm looking. So interpolation, it's in fact given some specific data points here. We try to identify a function which can best fit these data points and try to determine points of interest within this range. This will be called the interpolation, but trying to determine data points which are out of this initial range, this will be called extrapolation. So now judging from what the shape of the function has, we would have to define points that look like this, and in this case that look like this. This would be the extrapolation. Interpolation, it was essential or very important also because often we may need to resize up, or which means to blow up any specific image, and we had to. So an image which could be 100 by 100, if we blow up to 200 by 200, we need to determine several pixels which are in between, which would be new values of the pixels. We also covered some important aspects which were related to the resolution of a specific camera. And with the resolution, what we mean, this means that the minimum distance that we can determine in a specific object that we are observing. And regarding that one, we defined a quantity which was called the line pair per millimeter, which is just which is defined as W. Is best if we locate. Let's see. We have an example. Let's say. So, if we try to have an image which has a field of view in the order of 50 millimeter by 50 millimeter, this is what we call the field of view. And this field of view, if we want to observe this one using an image, so this is the object we want to observe, and using a lens system, let's assume for a moment that we use a lens system to bring this down into a camera or into a CMOS. So this is what this would be called. And this one, the camera, it can have a resolution of 2048 by 2048, which is something like 2 to the power 11. And this means that we may expect a spatial resolution. So we have, let's say, around 50 millimeter. We can divide this one by 2048. And here, maybe I need to. So this would be 2048, and in this case, we just have a number in the order of 50 divided by 2. Let's do this one, 5 times 10, 2 to the power 3, and this would be equal to 5 divided by 2. This is 2.5 times 10 to the power minus 2, So this would be the spatial resolution that we observe for the between any 2 points in this region. So this is how much we can really observe or really determine. So if we have 2 features, if they are closer than, and this would be, the unit here is 2.5 times 10 to the power minus 2, this would be millimeter, and this millimeter, this would correspond to, so if we multiply this one by 1000 micrometer divided by 1 millimeter, we're going to get here a spatial resolution of approximately 25 micrometers, which is a really good resolution for a system which has no magnification at all. So imagine for a moment we are not magnifying anything, but just projecting a small region into a huge number of pixels. We can obtain such a spatial resolution. So we also covered some examples which were related to the possible resolution in space. You can go over the examples on a textbook, but I can write here a comment here in the textbook. The theory of resolution has an aspect which I can note here. There is a textbook. So whenever there is the discussion of the spatial resolution in imaging systems, I was running some numbers. They didn't seem to be correct. After a communication with the author of the textbook, we concluded into a better approximate solution. But you can read the comment in the chat section. Now today we are going to discuss about. And the author, Gonzalez, is a very kind person. He's very fast into replying the emails. If you have any problem, you can always email. And most of the time, people that have a high or they have enthusiasm into their research area, they will be very fast to answer, and also very kind individuals. Now, today we're going to talk about the different spatial filters, and so whenever we analyze a specific image, we have to work on the pixel itself, and also we have to work with the neighborhood pixels in the surroundings. And in this case, for this specific pixel, we are going to use a 3x3 neighborhood. Assuming that we have the pixel in the center, we have a neighborhood of which we can consider this one as N8, okay, which means that we have 8 neighbors. Now, this topic or this chapter is also called intensity transformation, or also spatial filtering. Now, when we talk about the spatial filtering, we're just talking in the space. This is measured in meters. Okay, so let's also consider the following. So intensity transformation in spatial filtering. This is the unit from one pixel to another. This is meters. This is very essential actually. So the unit that we use whenever we do an analysis of the quantities that we're dealing with, that tells you a lot about which domain we are dealing with. This real domain, this we call real domain or pixel domain. So we are going to read numbers that are of this nature. The numbers, there will be anything which is, so for an image which is 8-bit, we are going to read in a specific location of an image any number between 0 to 255. So this is the range where we're going to read these numbers. As long as we're dealing with numbers like these, this is real domain, pixel domain, and but we have also another domain which has units which can be noted as meter inverse or 1/meter, and this would be the reciprocal domain or the Fourier domain. And for many, the closer to intuition regarding the reciprocal domain or the conjugate domain or the Fourier domain. So there are several synonyms regarding this. The closer one to intuition is when we have the real domain, so this is meter inverse, we can have another conjugate pair, which is seconds and hertz. So this is real domain, this is Fourier domain, or the reciprocal domain. The same way that we have second and inverse seconds, we have also meters and inverse meters. But we're going to talk about this reciprocal domain later. For now, we should know that we're dealing only with real numbers. Now, regarding the pixel values, we can implement specific transformations where we can read this like as follows. So let's assume that we have some pixel values which can range from 0 to 255 if it is 8-bit. And for example, if you see the first image here on the left side, we can see that we have a high gradient of the pixel intensities in the mid-range of the visible domain. So in this case, actually, we can, starting from the domain which can be dark, which is 0 out of 8-bit values, up to a very bright region. We have a region which, in 8-bit domain, the middle would be something like 120, 27, 28. That would be the mid-range. And we can, and what we see here is that we have, in a very narrow domain, we cannot see much. Okay, so everything is grayish. So the pixel intensity domain, the image on the left side of this slide, it has all the pixels, all of them. They are in a very narrow range, which would be something from K to R0. Now, what can be done is that this range can be stretched out. So you can look at the projection. So you have a look on what is the Y value, which corresponds to the K, and it's a value somewhere in the mid-range of the Y-axis. And the projection of the R0, it is projected to the S0 is equal to the transformation function TR0. And it looks like a delta X in the R domain. It is a huge delta Y in the Y-axis. Okay, so we have somehow stretched the pixel values. Now, in the second graph that we see here on the right side, we have simply applied, we have not implemented a stretching of the pixel values or the contrast, but it's a purely threshold function. Any value larger than some specific threshold K, we assign it as 1 or completely white, and anything with intensity smaller than some threshold, we assign this one as a completely dark image. So we get a binary representation of the image, and examples we're going to see quite a few. So now the most important results related to the intensity transformation, in principle, it would be image enhancement. And image enhancement, it's a very important or essential area of research. And image enhancement, it includes, or it's often used whenever you do anything with images. There is a step which is defined as pre-processing. Okay, pre-processing. So pre-processing is a step which just somehow modifies the pixels that are given to us with the objective to enhance the image and to, so pre-processing. So we have here enhancement. Other important aspects that needs to be done is background removal. Also, we can also consider illumination equaling. We want to obtain equal illumination. And all of these steps, which are very, very important, especially for low contrast images, we can obtain enhancement, background removal, equal illumination, and these are to a computer the improvement that is done using the intensity transformation operations for each one of these, and most probably a few more steps, which for the moment I cannot remember. All of these, they can be related, or the benefit of these steps can be observed into an improvement of the accuracy of a specific algorithm. This is what has to do with the computer or with a computing unit. to human or to us, in principle, this is something just human perception. It improves our capability to observe a specific image that is given to us. Now, fundamental intensity transformations that can be used, they are shown here in this slide. So this includes the L, the value of L for 8-bit image, or let's say for 4-bit image. If we have an image which is 4-bit, the L is equal to 2 to the power 4 minus 1. So this would mean 2 to the power 4, 2 times 2, 4, 8, 16, minus 1, 15. So in this case, in this graph, we observe that we can have an input intensity level, which is from 0 to 15, and it outputs the intensity levels, again, from 0 to 15. Now, the two extreme cases of the intensity transformations are the negative. Yes, they are the negative of the original image, which in principle, this is just any region, the darkest region, they are transformed into the brightest region of the image. And the inverse of this one would be the identity function. And now when you see the identity function, all of these curves that we see in this graph, which are in total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which have a relatively positive slope. We have 4 functions or 4 transformations which have a positive slope. We have also the negative, which is a slope which has a negative Capirci negative. It has a negative slope. We have a total of 6 functions which can be observed here. Now, regarding the transformation from inverse logarithmic, it is an exponential function, to the other function, which is the logarithmic one. What they do is that, for example, the logarithmic function, what it does, it stretches out a very small range in the x-axis domain to a much wider range in the y-axis. Okay, this is what logarithmic does. You can see this one. So you can see what is the delta x. How does the delta x projects onto the y? If it projects into a wider delta y, this means that we are doing pixel, or let's say intensity stretching, or we're stretching out the values that we are seeing. The inverse function, which is the inverse logarithmic or exponential, what it does is that a large range in x, it is projected in a narrower range in y. Now here we see some images which are low contrast images, like obtained with X-rays. We have the original image. We can apply the negative function here. We can observe. Oh, this is a very fundamental transformation that we observe here. In principle, the first image on the left side, this is a Fourier spectrum of a certain image. Okay, and Fourier spectrums, if we have, let's say, if you have an image which is 300 pixels by 300, a square image or standard one, if we calculate the Fourier spectrum, what we obtain, we still see an image which is 300 by 300, but the center of this image, it has the highest intensity, which is at the center, which means that somewhere with coordinates 150 by 150, that is the highest intensity. But and this Fourier transform, what it represents all the possible frequencies. But now what happens, the image which is on the left side, this is the absolute value, okay? Which means that this is showing the absolute value. So where the most intense peak, which is in the center, can be scaled to whatever is the maximum possibility to observe, which in this case, let's assume that the image which is shown here on the left, it is shown with a peak, with an 8-bit, or let's say 4-bit. If this is 4 bits of data, this means that we have a range from 0 to 15. So if these are integers, that means that we have 16 different levels of quantization in the intensity levels. But if one peak is huge and the rest has a very low intensity, then it would be very difficult for us to observe. So then here we can have some pixels which have a value of, let's say, 10, and then we have many pixels which have a value of 10 to the power minus 15. Now, what is the meaning of having an intensity of 10 to the power minus 15? Human perception cannot even see 10 to the power minus 3. Okay, so for human perception, 10 to the power minus 3 to 10 to the power minus 15 is the same thing. We see nothing. Okay, but if we have a range from 10 to the power 1 to 10 to the power 15, what we can do is that we can calculate the logarithm of this function. So if we calculate the logarithm, then the logarithm of with base 10 of 10 to the power 1, it's 1. Then the logarithm of 10 to the power minus 15 is minus 15. So now this huge range, which is equal to 16 orders of magnitude. Okay, so from 10 to 10 to the power minus 15, what is the range? 10 to the power 16. It's a huge range. Human perception, we cannot really see it. We get saturation at a very high level, and that's it. The rest, we don't see it. So the same thing is also happening in this image on the left. But what we can do, if we calculate the logarithm of this original domain, what we finally obtain, we just see a rescaling of the image, which is going to change from 1 to minus 15. Okay, this is exactly what has happened here, and we see that all of these features, which were there, they were recorded by the computer. Human perception did not allow to see that in the edges of the image on the right side, we have non-zero values all across the image. Now, here we have another type of transformation. So if we go backwards, that's the logarithmic function and inverse logarithmic, which is the exponential. Here we have some other image transformations, which are the gamma transformation. The gamma transformation, it just raises to power gamma the intensities. We're going to see some examples, but let's see what happens here. We have the original image, which is gamma corrected with a specific value. For example, if we apply a gamma equal to 2 to the power, the original image 2 to the power 2.5, this is what we observe the image which is seen on the right side. And this gamma, this is the function for gamma transformation. It's simple. Let's see we always have an R as an input, and S would be equal to R to the power gamma. So this is gamma transformation. Input pixel intensities, we denote them with R. The new values, it is S 59. I just want to see for a second if we can. I just want. So yeah, here we have an example where we can show an example. So let's clear a few variables, and this is gone. Let's read this image. I1 is equal to imread pattern 9 JPEG. So here there is the image. This is how the image looks like. Well, there is something, but we cannot perceive it. We cannot see. So this is what we are plotting. And in fact, this image or these values that we just read here, this is I1. Let's open this a little more. And if we double click here, we see that these variables, which are, and let's see how many variables do we have here. The number of pixels, they are 1024 multiplied by 1280. So these two multiplied together, we get something which is higher than 10 to the power 6, which is 1.3 million different pixels. And we see that it is unsigned integer 8. So if this is unsigned integer 8, that means that the maximum possible value of the intensity would be equal to 255, okay? This is what the maximum value would be. But let's see what it really is. So let's do max of the image I1. apparently the maximum value, it is, we could not see this one. Why is this the case? Wait a second. Subscript indices must be either real, positive. I don't understand this. So we said that I1 it's equal. Oh no, okay. I have to, sorry, this is a mistake. I have to delete this for a moment because I was just trying to, yes, how to delete this. It's because it doesn't make much sense. And I was just trying to write something like a text, but this is going to be, okay, this makes sense. So it looks like the maximum value that we observed for this image is 19. So this was the pixel itself. Apparently, most of the values, they are from 6 to 7. Okay, so, and then, so it looks like all the pixels are found in a very narrow range, even though we can they can be stretched out from 0 to 255. And just by the way, 255 divided by 19, we see 13. So what we can do, in fact, is that we can multiply by 13 this original image, and we can see something which looks better. So let's try this one. Let's call this let's call image 13. This is equal to I1 times 13, and then we can say figure 111 im show image 13, which was multiplied with its specific value, evaluate selection, and this is what we observe. Okay, so these images, they had a very low contrast, the intensity was too low, the information was there, but human perception does a very bad job at the low range of the 8-bit distribution. So, for example, let's see also figure 112. Let's see let's see the histogram of image 1, and the histogram of image 1. It will be good. Let's see what we observe. So there they are. All the pixels, they are down here. So, and that's why we cannot see it, because we are kind of we cannot do that good. Humans, that's the best we can do. And now let's see what is this 113. So now this is what we did. Just by adapting or changing a little bit the histogram of the pixels, this is what we observe. So in principle, we can now see the image. Okay, and let's also. Now, there is another algorithm, which is histogram equalization, which is going to distribute equally the probabilities of all the pixels which are given in an image. But for the moment, this is relatively more or less what we want to observe. Now, we can also assume we can apply the gamma transformation. In principle, gamma transformation, this is what it is. We just raise the original image to the power 2.85, and the maximum pixel value, it was 19. So let's do 19 to the power 2.85. We find this is too much. Is this correct? Yes, this is 4. What is this? This is huge. This is 4,000. You should not see this. Yes, we can try this one. So now, in order, yes. So in principle, we're just converting the original image into double, because it has to be double in order to raise this one to a specific power. Once we find this image raised to a power n, and then, but when we raise the number to a power, so this is, for example, this answer, this is 4410.1. This is what it is. Okay, so it is a decimal value. But if you apply the function floor, this gets the integer part of the number. Then we can convert this one into unsigned integer 8, and let's see what this produces for us. So this is what the image is. In fact, 2 to the power 85, this would be too much. So in principle, this is what gamma transformation does. Okay, so it spreads out the specific region, and let's see what this function is also reporting. We have, okay, and we can also have a look at what does the histogram look like, where the histogram again, okay, we didn't need to do it this way. And in fact, in this case, we observe a high level of saturation. High level of saturation, this means that we are providing values which are much higher than the maximum level. So here we have the histogram that we are going to observe. And in fact, what we can see from here is that if we add up the values of all of these graphs, this will be equal to the total number of pixels in the image. So we just need to add whatever the tip of these histograms report. Okay, so this was the gamma transformation, and let's see. So actually, in order to find the gamma, apparently, we found that the maximum pixel intensity was 19. So 19 to the power 1.85. We get a value of 232. This is less than 255. And we can work out together, or this function, I believe you have this function of, and you can experiment with these by calculating how let's see, did we input? So here we have another data. We are all. So let's see. We need an image. So this is, this is a good example. So we have an image which is initially the image S, which is aerial view, probably taken by a drone or something similar, and we can assign a gamma value, which is the original image, to the power 0. What is this? To the power 4. Okay. To the power 4, and we get S1. And now S1 is this image 8. Okay, so of course, to human perception, this image does a better job because we have a higher contrast and we can detect specific features much better. But personally, I don't understand this one because S1 is equal to double S to the power 4. Sorry, let me pick up. So to the power 4, Really? I'm trying to understand this. Un se kuptoj do pse del kështu kjo. Double S to the power 4. This is unsigned 8. Oh, okay. Now I understand it. I get it. Oh, for a moment, I was a little confused because if we... okay. So my confusion, it was related to this. Now, if we see this image here, this 7, this one, it is very high in intensity, okay? And if we raise all of these to power 4, that means that everything will be much brighter. But in fact, we got something like this. But one thing which I missed is that this image S1, this is not 8-bit image. Now this is something else, because the data type is not the same. But we can do something like this. We can say S2 is equal to unsigned integer 8 of S1. And now let's see what the image looks like. And let's do this figure 81 im show S2. So here we just looked at a much better image, but it was, and by the way, this S2, it was never, sorry, S1. So this one, let's make a note, not unsigned integer 8, S1. And let's try to determine what is the maximum value of the pixel of S1. This is 4.2 times 10 to the power 9. This is huge, okay? Because the maximum value, which is for image S, this was 255. So this was bright. So this image, this was the maximum value is 255. If we raise 255 to the power 4, it's going to be very high intensity, and it is obvious something like 10 to the power 9. I mean, this is, but when we plotted this one, if directly as a double, we observed a much better looking image. So these kind of tricks can be used for pre-processing to adjust it also adjusts the contrast between two subsequent objects on the same image. Okay, so it's not anymore blurry, but we can distinguish those. And by the way, let's see what happens if this S1, if we squeeze it down to 8-bit image. So let's try to evaluate this selection. We don't expect anything good. So we see very little information. Well, not information, it's all washed out because it's all white. So because what happens is that these values, which are 4.22 times 10 to the power 9, once we convert this one into unsigned integer 8, what it does at this specific value, it will be squeezed into a 255. This will be the maximum value, okay? So now with this example, we may understand the principle of saturation, which means that any value above the maximum possible value, it will be written as the 255. Okay, now here we see another example. Now you can play around again with the possible values of gamma. Let's do this one. So we have S2. Let's call this one S21. And let's call this one also S21. Now let's assume that gamma is equal to 0.4. S is the same original image. Let's evaluate the selection. And okay, it looks figure 9. It's not good. It's bad. But for a moment, let's make this one 1.7, and let's call this one as 22, figure 91, or 9.1. This is S22. So we can experiment here regard the different values of gamma, but together with the discussion of this looks a little better actually. So this image, which is figure 91, it is this image, figure 7, to the power 1.4, and we see something which is not that much washed out. It has some reasonable contrast that we can work with. Let's see what else we have. So again, this is all about different gammas in filter. Okay, so let's go back to the class material, which I should find it somewhere here. Okay, so this was regarding the gamma correction. Here there is an example of these patterned images, and actually this image is called pattern because these are microscopy images where there are some grooves or there are some scratches into the surface over which some biological samples are placed, and these grooves, they are small. They are something in the order of 2 to 20 micrometers, and because they are the same size as the biological samples that can be seen. But the objective here is to analyze these, and imagine now you are the user, you are trying to analyze these, but you have first to perceive what you are working with, okay? So once you see these periodic lines or periodic features, which are some vertical lines which appear at a specific angle with respect to the vertical axis, once we observe that, we can choose a specific approach how to analyze this data. But once we see it, then we can implement some object detection algorithm using a computer. Now, if we know what the image is, and we apply this algorithm on the original image, which is the very one on the left side, on the far left side, the computer is going to do a perfect job, okay? Because computers are good at quantitatively analyzing certain features, okay? Sometimes there are some algorithms which also affect the outcome of the accuracy of an algorithm by adjusting the pixels to improve the contrast. Okay, so I can repeat in one sentence. Computers do a very good job to quantify contrast, which is hidden to human perception. So they can do the same job the same way, but sometimes if we modify some specific pixels, even these types of transformations are going to improve the overall accuracy that can be implemented in any problem that includes image analysis. Here we see some other examples. Examples are everywhere. We just observed that the first image apparently is an MRI, the magnetic resonance image of a human spine. This is scary. And this one, it is modified using specific gammas, and for specific, it looks like the image is the one at the top left side is the original one obtained. Applying these modifications, we see that we can obtain much more features, especially this region which is drawn with a white circle. You can see that there are more intensity gradient to be observed. Here again, I think we experimented with this image actually. Given the original image, if we use gammas 3, 4, 5, apparently this is what we obtain. Now, here we see that whenever we try to improve the image that we have, we can use the contrast stretching, and for example, what we can see here is that we can imagine the following: the x-axis, it is R, okay, and have a look for a moment. What is the range from R1 to R2? From R1 to R2 is somewhat 1/3 of the whole domain, okay, of the whole values from 0 to L-1. So I'm saying that what we read on the x-axis. Then actually maybe it's best if we do it like this. Of course, I'm not very good at drawing. Sorry, no, not this. So on the oh no. Let's see if I can do a good job in a very short time. No, I'm messing up. So this is the range in the x-axis. Okay, this is how much pixel intensities we are covering here, and these values along the x-axis, they are projected into. So this is the delta y. So this is the delta x, and this is the delta y. We really see that the so small delta x is going to produce a huge delta y, and this means contrast stretching. And for this original image, which is shown here on the where the mouse is, so okay, I cannot move all of this. So this image here on the top right side, it can be improved using two different gamma values for stretching out the intensities. So let's come back. So again, here, for example, we can observe that all the pixels, for example, the image on the left side, what we observe is that all the values from 0 to 8, they are projected on a single value, okay? So we're applying some window function or some threshold function, and all the values from A to B, they are shown much higher. So in principle, this image on the, which can be seen on the left side, this is like a binary representation of the pixel intensities that we may have. So what we are doing is that something which is brighter than some threshold, meaning higher than A, and smaller than some B, they are projected into some specific pixel value. A similar transformation is done on the image on the left side. And what it does, this just highlights the range between A and B and leaves all the other intensities unchanged. So you can see what we're doing here. Now, here we also observe another image, which is the aorta, or the blood vessels close to the heart. And so, for example, depending on what we want to see, we can also determine what type of transformation we can use, because we may want to enhance some specific regions. Now, when we have these images, often we can decide on what type of image analysis we're going to do based on the bit planes. Now, with bit planes, we have, if we have an image which has 8-bit, that means that we can have some bits which are the most significant and the least significant. Now, the original image that we can analyze here is, for example, the image we have, which is on the top left side. We see an 8-bit grayscale image with a specific size, and then we see, so we have, this is a 3x3 matrix with different images, and we observe, let's read this one, bit planes 8 through 1 respectively, where plane 1 contains the least significant bit. Now, I want you to be a little careful in this for this figure. So let's see for a moment. We have an original grayscale image, and we're trying to represent it with different values. Now, we can use the most significant bit, and the most significant bit, it obtains this image. Maybe I want to show it this way. So the most significant bit is going to be this. Okay, I'm doing. Anyway, is this image, and the least significant bit, it is down here. The least significant bit, what we are, so this is something strange actually. So when I was first thinking about this one, it was a little bit confusing to me, because what this image is showing here, this is like pure noise. Okay, so there is no feature in here. So what these pixels are showing here, they are showing whether the intensities which are shown in this original image, whether those are odd numbers or even numbers. So assume that in this image here, some pixels can be 244. If it is 244, it's going to be an even number. It can also be 211. That's an odd number. Whether it's odd or even, that piece of information is provided right here at the bottom. But so this means that we have classified all the given pixels just 0 and 1s, okay, odd or even. But if we see this other image here, we are defining, this is the image which we denote here with a red arrow, which has the most significant bit. The most significant bit, this means that we try to quantify the whole range into 2 significant domains, which in principle, this means this is the same as having a binary image, whether it's 0 or 1. More details we can see in this slide. So let's see an image which is not image. This is a matrix which is 4-bit information. This information, it is 4-bit because we have the values which vary from 0 to 15. 2 to the power 4, 2 times 2, 4, 8, 16, minus 1, 15. Now, if we have an image which is 4-bit, the values of x, they're going to change from 0 to 15, and what they are in this matrix, which is 8 by 8, okay? Sorry, 4 by 4. Now, all these 15 different values, they are shown using this representation 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1. So these are all their respective values. Now, the least significant bit, it is the bit on the very right side. So if you watch carefully, these are the numbers from 1 to 15 representation. And then we see that the least significant bit, what it is doing, it's changing between 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. So this is just telling to us whether the number, it is even or odd. Okay, that's it. This is the least significant bit. So also, the image which was in the previous slide, the least significant bit, it is here, which means that we see nothing useful because it's going to be the bottom right side. And then let's go back here. This was the least significant bit. And here we have the most significant bit, the MSB, which is the fourth bit. Now, let's have a look at fourth bit. What the fourth bit is doing, it is separating the whole range into different two domains. That's what it's doing. So the first four, the first 8, they are all zeros. The second 8, they are all ones. Now, this is the fourth bit. Let's have a look at the third bit. What is the third bit doing? For this one, we have to look at the second column of these numbers of 0 and 1s. What is the second column doing? The first 4 values are 0. The second 4 values are all ones. Okay, so you can look at the numbers between the red vertical line and the blue vertical line. So what we see is that the third bit, it's dividing the whole range into 4 different levels. 4 values 0, 4 values 1, 4 values 0, 4 values 1. Okay, then the bit which is covered by the blue line here, actually, but you can actually see more. You can see the zeros and the ones. The bit which is covered by one of the blue lines, it is dividing the whole range now in 8 different regions, which is 2 zeros to 1s, 2 zeros to 1s, 2 zeros to 1s, and so on. Then the least significant bit, the last bit, it separated the whole domain into 16 different regions, which is 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Let's move ahead. So MSB, it comprises the whole range in 2 levels, the next one into 4 levels, the next one into 8 levels, and the very last one, the least significant bit, into 16 levels. Now, LSB, this is what it's doing, determines whether the numbers are even or odd. Now, these numbers that we see here in this matrix, 4x4 matrix, they are shown here. The 0, it is 0, 0, 0, 0. The 2, it is 0, 0, 1, 0. The 1, which is the third element in the first column, the third element, if we count downward, the 1, it is 0, 0, 0, 1. The 3, it is 0, 0, 11, and so on. So these are the numbers which are shown here. Now, the most significant bit can separate the whole range between, so annotating the pixels which are shown between, that are glowing, red, black. So anything which is higher than 7, it's equal to, we show it in red. Okay, this is what most significant bit is doing. And the most significant bit, here they are. The 8 is 1, the 15 is 1, 14 is 1. So larger than 7, that's good. This is MSB. Now, let's see this one. The third bit, this is denoting, so this is what the third bit is doing, which means, for example, we have the 6, it's equal to 1. We have another 6 down here. So you can read this one carefully, and this is what the next bit is doing, and this is again, so let's see what this is. These are the numbers that are odd. So the last integer, this is just showing the numbers which are odd. So if we see this one in the very end, 0, that means it's even, 1, it's odd. And in the second row, we observe that the second row on the original image, it is 2, 2, 1, 1, which means even, even, odd, odd, which means 0, 0, 1, 1. And then here we have, in the third row, we have 1, 15, 14, 12. That means that odd, odd, even, even. So 1, 1, 0, 0. So we read this one. And now the whole range, it can be divided into 2 to the power 4 minus n plus 1. So if we want to divide, so in case we have n equal to 4, we can substitute the So this is the let's assume this one. The fourth bit, yeah, this is the way to consider this one. The fourth bit, n equal to 4, divides the whole range into two divisions. So d is equal to 2. Fourth bit is 2, 4 minus 4 is 0, plus 1, 1, 2 to the power 1, that's 2. So we got d is equal to 2. The third bit is doing the following. We have 2 to the power 4 minus 3, 1 plus 1. 2 to the power 2 is 4. So really you can see that when n is equal to 3, d is 4. When n is equal to 2, this is equal to 8. When n is equal to 1, and so on, that's the first bit. We get the separation into 16 different domains. Good. Now I hope we understand this one, which means let's say the bit plane analysis. Let's go to the next slides. So now we again, using the principles that we just learned from the previous slide regarding the bit planes, here we see the original image, which was shown a couple of slides before, and the image A, which is on the very left side. We have this image which is produced by the reconstructing using the bit plane 8 and bit plane 7, which are the most significant bits in here. Now here we move to this other slide. This is again intensity transformation, which is used to improve the quality of the image. We just observed that the original histogram of the dark image, we see the values which are in the image on the bottom left side. So the pixels are on the dark side. We can blow up those values. We can raise all of them up. We see that the histogram has now shifted to the higher values of the pixel intensities. Then we can have a low contrast image, which is a little brighter. So actually, going from image A to image C, we can perceive this one as adding a constant value to all the pixels which are in the original image. The best image out of all of these here, it is image D, because the image now has a high contrast, and we can consider this one as having an equalized histogram. Now, there are several theories. If you read from the textbook, I'm afraid there are approximately more than 40 or 50 pages just discussing about histogram analyzation of an image, which includes histogram equalization, histogram matching, template matching, all of these amazing different algorithms that can be implemented. And that makes also chapter 3 a very voluminous chapter, as shown in here. Now, this was, we can only just judge from the quality of the histogram and the image above the histogram to deduce what has been done. Now, in some type of transformations, what can be something which is relatively criticizable, which can be Mundt-Korrejohar, is that several values can be projected to a single value, and that is not very good. Sorry, that's not good, because we will not be able to observe intensity gradient. The example here is on figure A. On figure B, we do a better job, which is on the right side. Now, here we see an approach that we can try to obtain histogram equalization. Now, in figure A, we are given a probability distribution function of the pixels, and we observe that some pixels somewhere in the mid-range of between 0 and L-1, the highest probability is equal to A. And now, what has to be done is the following. We should, so if this is probability distribution function, the integral of this PDF, it has to be equal to 1, okay? Because this is the probability. And in this case, the highest value of A can be something which could determine a value in the order of 0.3 or 30%. So adding up all of these percentages, it should give a probability equal to 1. So that makes it a PDF. So, or in principle, the area, it is equal to 1. If we do histogram equalization, we get the image which is shown, image B, or on the right side, because the area over there, it's also equal to 1. Because if we have 256 different values of pixels. That means that if we make them equally probable, that means that probability is 1 over L minus 1. It's the same way as having 10 different values. You want equal probability. The probability for each 10 of them can be 10%. So 1 out of 10 times 10, we get a probability of 1. So if you look here at this image, at the very image D, which is on the very right side, we see a probability almost equal. So this is something very close to what we're trying to do here in this figure 3.18 by looking at how we have spread out these values. Now, here, in principle, the relationship that we may have to deal with is that for all the given pixels that are initially provided, we try to obtain the probability of specific pixels using a function which has, so the function is going to be the following. So these values that are shown here, it's a 3-bit image, and in this 3-bit image, the maximum pixel intensity, it is equal to 2 to the power 3, which is 8, minus 1, and so which is maximum value, it's 7, from 0 to 7. In a 3-bit image, we have the range is 0 to 7, and the new probability of each of the pixels, it can be written as so we have to apply a transformation function onto RK, okay, and this will be equal to L minus 1 times the summation of the probabilities from 0 to K. And here we put the probability of each Rj, okay. So this is the new probability of each value of K. So in this case, let's have a look, for example. In this case, we have, let's see what we observe. We have, for example, when K it is, or when the pixel is equal to 0, that means the probability to have, this is S, okay, 1.4. So we are trying to, let me say it this way. We're trying to modify the histogram. Okay, this is how the histogram is going to change. And the probability of this pixel is 0. It is going to be equal to L minus 1. L, it is 7. Because L, we said this is going to be, because L, it was equal to, here. L, it was 2 to the power K minus 1. In this case, 3-bit image that makes 7. So this is going to be here 7 times the summation of J from 0 to 0 of all the probabilities of Rj's. Now the probability of 0, we have a look here, the probability is 0.19. So this is 7 times 0.19. And we get a value approximately 1.4. Okay, so then if we see at the histogram, which is modified, which is Sk as a function of Rk, we see that the pixel, which is 0, is going to have a probability given by 1.4. Then we have to calculate what is S1, and this is similarly, we're going to have the same expression. So this is 7 times the summation between from J0 to J1. So this is 7 times the probability of a value 0, which is 0.19. I'm reading the table on the top right side. So here we have 0.19 plus 0.25. In total, we get a value of approximately 3.08. or around 3. So we can round this out. So we observe that this one, sorry, this will have a probability between a little above 2.8, which is shown in here. The same story goes again. So S2, this is going to be equal to 7 times the probability for the value of 0 plus the probability for the value of 1 plus the probability for the value of 2. So we have here, this will be equal to 7 times the P0 is 19% plus the P1 25%, a quarter. So this is another 25 plus 0.21, 0.21. So we have approximately 0.2, 0.4, 0.65 times 7, 0.65 times 7. This is 0.4, 42, 46, 4.6. So this is going to be something around 4.6, and this is what we observe in the next graph. So this is the algorithm which can be used to project or to change or to modify the histogram from an initial given pixel intensity distribution. Now let's move a little further. So we just see we see the left column here. There are images given a different contrast, and the images on the right side, this would be when the histograms are equalized. So all of these results, so we have the initial intensity, it's all different from each other. Once we do the histogram equalization, we see something which is has a better contrast. Now, okay, so here this is something similar. Now, histogram equalization is not always the best approach. What we can often implement is the histogram matching or template matching. So this is what this means is that we can give a specific reference image which has a specific histogram distribution, and we can match the new image with the previous one in order to improve the quality. Here we have an example of in image A, we have an image which is pretty much dark, very less contrast. We don't understand actually several features. This is Phoenix leather. I'm trying to understand what this image includes inside, but I don't see much. This might look like some cables or cable components, more or less. And we observe at the bottom of the image, which is darker, we observe the specific histogram. And after it is modified, we observe a histogram which is not equal, but it is template matched, because we don't see all the pieces having the same probability. Okay, so here we have another example which can be used or which can be solved using a similar relationship as it is shown in here. So we just try to map original pixel values into the new values. Now, this is another example. We see that in this image, this is a little difficult to deal with because it has several pixels. They are dark, but we have also a region which is super bright, and we have another region which is super dark, and we need to there is a need to enhance this one. And in order to do this, so this is the image, and we can use the transformation which is shown in this graph. So what is it doing is that the narrow region and the dark sections, as we said before, human perception does a bad job at low intensities. So for pixels which are something between 0 and 63, or better than that, from 0 to 30, we have a very narrow range. We are just stretching that out, okay? We're stretching that out because we see that the very narrow range from 0 to 30 pixel intensities, it is projected into a y-axis, which is from 0 to 191, approximately, okay? So with that huge change, we are just enhancing the power to observe higher features, or not higher features. We can observe some contrast down there, but the images in this case, they appear to be noisy, and this is not the best way to work with. Okay, so this is also a little tricky whenever we try to improve the images. And regarding this, we can use there are several algorithms that have appeared also recently in the literatures, where one of them is Koltuk-Bollon-Chesery, and it is easy to find the code implementation of this specific histogram specification. So often they provide the code that you can run it right away in different programming languages. I've seen a student use the Koltuk-Bollon-Chesery histogram specification. I've seen students implementing this one in MATLAB. Now, let's move further. Now, this is just something regarding the different coordinates in an image. Actually, the slide is not. Let's see again. So this is an example again, the original image, which is image A, the image B, which is on the top right side. This is when we use histogram equalization. And the histogram equalization, this is something where we have an equal probability everywhere. But at the same time, we can also we can obtain image C, which is which is obtained using histogram specification. And I'm trying to see now which one has a better resolution, but it looks like this region in white color, or which is very high intensity, this has some more features which can observe better. Again, I mean, there are several examples. Here we see images which are taken from different satellites, trying to improve them for human perception by working only on, or mainly on, histogram equalization. For example, the image on image A, we observe that let's say more than half of the image is almost dark, so we don't see any specific feature. If you work really hard, you can observe that there is some structure over there at the bottom part of the image. Using histogram equalization, we can improve it as it is seen. Here we see again examples of improvement. Now, again, when you talk about the histogram equalization, we can have both global histogram equalization or local histogram equalization. Now, the local histogram equalization, it is much better, because in images we can have regions which are, let's say, one edge of the image can have a very low intensity, and the other edge can have a very high intensity. And in this case, we may have to use localized histogram equalization, because now this is not the best example to provide for, but in fact, actually this is something, it's a good example, because if you watch carefully, you can see at the top part of these images, we can see that there are some smaller structure which are seen only on image C. So once we use local histogram equalization, we can observe that inside all of these black boxes, there are some small features, like we have the letter A, we have a circle, we have also a square, etc. Now, here we have some, okay. Now, here we move in a different way, or a different approach of how to use spatial filtering, or the filtering in a spatial domain. And this spatial filtering, this includes the use of kernels. And these kernels, they are little matrices or filters. So we can call them just filter kernels or just kernels. And they provide for us some some weights. These weights, they assign numbers to specific pixels. For example, we see here a kernel which is 3 by 3, and the way that the kernels operate is that we have a pairwise multiplication of 9 elements with another 9 elements. So we have 9 pixel values multiplied by 9 respective weights. We add them together, and that's a kernel. Okay, or that's let's say a filtering using a kernel. Now, the simplest type of kernel is averaging, which is actually this. Let me think for a moment. Yeah. So the simplest type of filtering, it was just averaging, and averaging it's going to be something which is simply looking like this. That's it. Okay. So this is averaging, and this is like a box filter. A box filter, it does nothing, just calculates. So this is the kernel, right? Now, if we have a gradient of the pixel values around, what happens is that we calculate the average of 9 pixels and we write it down at the center one. Okay. So this is the filter. Let's say the averaging filter. Now we have also two completely different approaches, which is the correlation and the convolution. Now, regarding the correlation and convolution, we can obtain completely different results, and mathematically speaking, let's assume for a moment that we have a function which is let's assume we can have a function f which is composed of let's say a function which is all zeros and 1, and we multiply this one with a kernel which is the kernel w, and whenever we do the correlation, we just put the kernel on top of the function and we slide it over. Okay, but in case we have a convolution, what we do is that we rotate the whole one with respect to the other, and then we do the pairwise multiplication. And for example, if we see here, let's assume we have here. Wait a second. If I want the correlation of kernel. So the kernel in this case it's w, and we are going to slide it over a specific function, which can be like a step function. So the function which is shown here, it's all zeros and 1. It's 1, and we call this one as discrete unit pulse. Discrete unit pulse, or DUP. So let's call it this way. Nature of the kernel. And one thing that we often see in correlation and convolution is that we may need to include zero padding. Now, the zero padding, it is needed, especially for example, in this case, the kernel, it is 1 by 5. The W, it has values of 1, 2, 4, 2, 8. And since if we want to modify also the very first value in the function f, we have to put the center of the kernel next the center of the kernel on top of the first value we want to change. But in order to do this, since the kernel has a size of 5, and we put the center of the kernel to the first value that we want to change, we have to add zero padding, which is equivalent to adding 2 columns of zeros. And now we multiply the filter with this kernel. One problem that appears here is that when we have zero padding, often when we have let's say an image or a signal, and we multiply it with the kernel, we are going to observe a dark shadow at the very edge. Okay, because what we are doing to the first column or to the first row, we are simply decreasing the intensity forcefully. So we're just simply adding a few zeros over there. So often you may observe some images if you see regularly on the corners some darker pixels, you may expect the zero padding was applied for a filter, which could be something like larger than 3 by 3, which could be 5 by 5, 7 by 7. Now, larger the filter size, so this kernel, it is 5, okay, 1 by 5. This can be larger. In that case, the dark shadow, which can appear in at the edges, it is going to be more visible. So you can go over actually these calculations and just observe how the correlation result and how the convolution result is obtained for all of these values, for both of these cases. Now here we also observe a very interesting result. So here we have the convolution and the correlation. So when we use the correlation, we have, wait a second, so this is the final position. The correlation, it is equal to the, wait a second, it's equal to the negative of the correlation result. So the field, let me say it this way, the kernel is 12428, and the correlation result, it is the inverse of this one, okay? So it is 82421. But again, if we have the convolution, we start with a kernel which is 12428, and the result is again 12428. So now we have here, we can have, let's assume for a moment that you are given a black box, okay? And the black box, it's a function. So a student, one of your friends in the class, gives to you a function and says to you, run this function, okay? So this is a black box. And you have to figure out what type of function is this, or what is this function doing. So probably this can be, so assuming that this could be either correlation or convolution, what you can do is that you can insert a function which is 1, 2, 3, and you can observe the output, okay? So if the output, it is equal to 1, 2, 3, then this means that this is a convolution, okay? Or if it is inverse, then this is a correlation. So this is one way to, let's say, to analyze whether you have either one or the other. Now, and also, in order to analyze what type of kernels we may have in these black boxes, we may insert a discrete unit pulse as it is in here. So, for example, we may be given, or let's say, we don't know what the kernel is inside the black box, and what you can do is that you can insert a DUP function and see what is the output, okay? Here again, we see an example given. Now, this example here, it was the convolution of a one-dimensional function convolved or correlated with a one-dimensional kernel. In images, we often see the following. We have a kernel which is here W, which is a 3 by 3 filter or 3 by 3 kernel, and we want, if we implement this kernel onto an image which is a 5 by 5 image, which is all zeros, but it has only a value of 1. From here, we can observe that the correlation is going to obtain the mirror image of the kernel itself with respect to the center. Now, this would be the full result of the correlation. And I believe this is easy to distinguish. For example, this is 7. Yeah. For example, at this case, the very first position, where wait a second. So here we have, and this is a 3 by 3 kernel. The original function, it is 5 by 5. That means that if it is 5 by 5, we have to add zero padding. The zero padding in this case, it is going to be the kernel size. So this is the kernel size minus 1 divided by 2. So this is the number of zero padding. Similarly, so if the kernel is 3 by 3, then this would mean 3 minus 1 divided by 2. This is 1. So that means that the original image, which is 5 by 5, you add 1 zero padding. This becomes 7 by 7, and the first position, which is shown here at figure C, this is going to give a 0 at the edge of figure D. But now, if the whole 3 by 3 matrix, it moves one row lower, if you can see the mouse, sometimes the mouse is not visible. Do you see the mouse here on the PowerPoint? Do get mouse here?
Yes. Oh.
Okay. Anyway, so at this location where it is, thanks for confirming. So we're going to get a 0, which will going to be written right here. If this kernel moves one row lower and one column to the right side, then we will simply have 9 multiplied by 1, and all the other numbers are multiplied by 0. So that's how we get this 9 here. Okay. Now, then, if we move this to the other side, this is what we observe. So in fact, using these two-dimensional DUP functions, which we call the discrete unit pulses, we can observe, or imagine for a moment, you might be given the kernel, but you have a black box and you don't know what the black box is doing, whether it's a correlation or a convolution. You just insert this DUP, two-dimensional DUP. You look at the output and you tell your friend, okay, I gave this input, or let's say you had the kernel, I gave the DUP function, you observe what's the output, and you can determine whether it is the operation done in the second row in this slide or in the third row. Now, the convolutions, they have some specific properties, such as when you convolve two functions f and g, it is the same way as convolving with g and f. Okay, so it does not matter the order of applying a specific convolution or a specific filter. Now, this is something very amazing, a very good way to have it, because sometimes some filters, they can be very complex, and this complexity, it can be simplified by describing one kernel as a function of some other kernels. So now let's see an example here. So for example, here we see that we have two kernels which are seen. The one on the left side, it's a box kernel, which is simply an averaging kernel, because you add them, divide by 9. That's fine. The second one on the left, sorry, on the right, it's a Gaussian kernel. So if we plot this one, it looks like a normal distribution, but it's a 3 by 3 matrix, so it's going to be this not a smooth function for sure, but it's going to be something which we see some in the center. It has some peak, but in the edges it's going to be smaller. Now, Spatial filter is kernel. It's also equivalent to saying convolutional filter, mask or kernel, etc., etc. Now, the Gaussian kernel, it can be constructed using this Gauss kernel function, where m is the size of the filter, sigma is equal to 1. That's the standard deviation, and k would be equal to 1. Here, if we run these functions for different sigmas, this is what we observe. And when we use sigma equal to 0.5, there is this image which is on the top right side. Sigma equal to 1, we get this Gaussian, which looks like on the what's the name? Sorry, on the bottom right side. And the m is, by the way, it is the size of the kernel 3 by 3. Here in this slide, the image which is on the bottom left side, this is a kernel which is at least 17 by 17. And when it is 17 by 17, it is much easier to observe a gradual change or something which looks closer to a normal distribution. or a Gaussian curve, which in these Gaussian curves, this is what they look like, okay? They have a sigma here, an average value, and an amplitude, and yeah. Okay, so now we have an interesting aspect, or also an important aspect, where specific filters, they can be decomposed into the product of two vectors. So now what we mean here is that, imagine for a moment that we have, or just if you go back to linear algebra, so you know linear algebra, and we can have a vector which is 3 by 1, and we do the inner product of this vector with another vector which is 1 by 3. If we multiply these two vectors, we know that the result is going to be a matrix which is 3 by 3. So a matrix which is 3 by 3, it can be in principle equal to any matrix, any kernel that looks like here, right? But now, in case we can write a kernel. So let's use it here. In fact, this slide explains it correctly. So we have a kernel Wm by n. It can be separable if it can be written as the product of two vectors, m by 1 and 1 by n. And the benefit of having kernels which can be decomposed or they can be separable, it is in terms of the computational complexity. Once we are working with several kernels, and regarding this, we can assume the following. So if we have an image which is, let's say for a moment, how can I write this one? Imagine for a moment that we have an image m by n. So the image, it is m rows, m columns. So this is capital M by capital M. And we have a small kernel, which is, let's say, small m by small n. So this would be 1000 by 1000. So let's write this one, 1000 by 1000. And here we have a kernel, which is 3 by 3. Now, the total number of calculations for each kernel, so let's say if we have one pixel here, for this one pixel, we have 9 multiplications. So the number of multiplications for a single pixel, it is going to be m times n. And then, but this is only for one pixel. Then we have to multiply this one by the number of rows, which is going to be n, or m. And then we multiply it also by the number of columns. So in principle, the number of calculations needed when we implement a kernel, which is a 2 by 2 matrix, this is the total number of calculations. But if we assume that this little kernel can be written as the multiplication of two vectors, then the number of calculations so let's call this one vector x, and this is cross product with another vector y, okay? So these two would be equal to the kernel W, which is a matrix. So maybe it's better if I write it this way. I'm not representing vectors like x dot y, and this would be equal to W, which is a matrix, okay? So vector, or column, row, this is matrix, square matrix. Now, if we decompose it, if we have n pixels, we multiply by m, which is one dimension of the kernel. This is the number of calculations if we implement just this kernel. And then we have the same number of pixels which we implement to this one, the other vector. When we mean the other vector, we mean the following. So this is a kernel -1, 0, 1. So what this does, this is not a kernel of which can be represented by a matrix which can be 3 by 3. This is 1 by 3. And what this is doing, this is simply trying to detect edges or vertical edges in an image. Okay, so this is a kernel. So now imagine you have kernels which can be separable. Then the total number of calculations, it is mn, both capital, times little m plus little n. So the number of calculations is going to be less. Why could this be useful? Now, this can be useful in terms of computational complexity time, because sometimes, especially in deep learning algorithms, one can have a convolutional neural network, or let's say a CNN, which can have a complex architecture. The complex architecture, it can have, let's say, the number of filters often increases by a factor of 2 if you go from one layer to the other. And assuming that we can start with around 16 filters, so we can have several layers, and the number of kernels or the number of filters in each layer, it might increase by a factor of 2. So if we start in the first layer with having 16 kernels, in the second layer we can have 32. We go again, 64, 128. So now we have 128 kernels, and these kernels can have different sizes. They can be all 3 by 3, all 5 by 5, or 7 by 7. If these kernels can be separable, that means that the computational complexity to calculate the convolutions of the original image with several filters in order to extract several feature vectors, the computational complexity will greatly drop if all of these kernels can be separable, okay? Because in principle, what we do, we have the original image, we convolve it with several number of filters, and here we have not shown yet the size of the filter. It can be 11 by 11. There are some convolutional neural networks architectures which are very unique. Some do a very good job with small kernels. Some do a very good job with, when you see small kernels, they can be even kernels of 3 by 3. Some do a perfect job if they go with a size of 11 by 11, and so on. So we have a lot of calculations. Once you convolve the images with these filters, we can obtain a feature vectors. These feature vectors can be afterwards compared with other feature vectors to extract several important parameters we may be interested. And all of this means that a huge computational complexity, which might take hours on very high performing or on computing units that can have a very high performance. Okay, so let's see what we observe here. So, in fact, here we have some examples, and you can run these. But let me see. You can check actually what x1 does. A1, it's x1, x2, x1 plus x2, rank A. Okay. So this produces one row, but maybe it's best if you run this one on your own. And the essence here is once we are given several rows, we try to get the rank of A. If you remember the rank of A from linear algebra, it is, let's say, the number of rows which are linearly independent. If we have a matrix which is 5 by 5, if the rows are linearly dependent, the rank can be something which is smaller than 5. If there is randomness, the rank is going to be equal to the number of rows, and so on. So, for example, if we have here Gauss kernel, okay, this might be interesting. So what you can do is that you can get a Gaussian kernel and then try to find the rank. Here there is a good example, in fact. Now, let's have a look at Gaussian kernel. Gaussian kernels, they look like this, which is this one on the top right side. Now, are these 3 rows linearly independent of each other? What can you say here? So this question that we just asked, it is equivalent to saying the following. Is the rank of this 3 by 3 matrix equal to 3? Which means that are all the rows independent? In fact, we notice that the first row is equal to the third row. So one rank is gone, which means that the rank of a Gaussian kernel should be 2. It's good if we check this, and let's try, sorry. Okay, so here we have a 5 by 5 kernel, which is shown here, and let's see how this looks like. Figure 11. Okay, so this is how this looks like. 5 by 5. It's not. We can also. Okay, so this is our kernel. Okay, now this is what it looks like. I need some memory here, and let's try to determine what is the rank of this kernel, which is W, and should be something like 3. Let's see. Oh, it's 1. Okay. Yeah, it is 1, and what is interesting is that if this one, if this is, let's say, if the rank of this Gaussian kernel is equal to 1, then this means that this is separable, or that this one can be multiplied, can be found as the inner product of two vectors. And let's see if we have, if I'm sure, no, we are not showing it here, but okay. Okay, so in fact, at this stage, here, okay, let's see. Okay. I'm trying to find, let's see. Find it. I don't want to use this. Okay, test pattern. Oh, okay. Here we have an example. So let's assume. So we just read this. This image is 1024 by 1024. Let's try to determine what is the maximum value of this pixel intensities. We see it's 255, and then let's try to have a look. Let's construct a Gaussian kernel, and this Gaussian kernel, it is 7 by 7. It's even hard to read it, so size W, it is 7 by 7. And with this Gaussian kernel, we can, so I test, we have this image, and I2 would be the original image filtered or convolved with the filtered W. So I2, and let's see what are their respective figures. So figure 1 is going to be the original image, and the figure 2, so this is the original image. Figure 1, we could not see it. Figure 2, we cannot see, there is something wrong. So here we have I1, but this has to be I2. Okay, so this is figure 2. And figure 1, here it was, and what we did here is that we started with this and we convolved this original image with the filter W. Now, Gaussian filter, it's not a good filter, it's an averaging one. And as an averaging filter, what it does is that it diminishes the edge information, or it diminishes the high frequency terms at the edges. So right at the edges, we can have a pixel value which is something high intensity, and right next to it a very low intensity. If we start averaging out at the edge, we are smoothing out the values. And regarding this, imagine for a moment we have the figure 1 and figure 2. We can also try to see what we observe. So let's say here we have figure, not like this, figure 3, im show, what is I test minus I2. So if these two images are equal to each other, then we should get zeros. Now let's see what we observe. So this is the difference that we obtain from subtracting A. So these two images, and probably let me also try the following. So unsigned integer. Let's do this one, figure 31. I'm not sure which one is more, which looks better. This one or this one. This one looks a little better because we just stretched out everything. But now, and then what we can do, so in fact, what we obtained, this was the original image. This is the Gaussian filtered image, which means that high frequency term wiped out, okay, which means that it's in bad shape. And here we have the original image minus, let's say, minus the low frequency terms, because high frequency terms are wiped out. But now what we can do is the following. We can improve the quality of the original image by increasing the contrast, by having here 3:2 im show the original image, which is I test plus, wait a second. Yeah, in fact, we can have this I test plus the difference. So actually, if we show it in here, it is much more helpful. So we're trying to do the following. So this is the original image, figure 1. To this image, we can add this image. We simply do mathematical addition. And in fact, what we see here is that we have all the edge information. So all the edge information is clearly obvious here. It's not that good. Well, we have to zoom in because here we can try to observe whether the letter A, it is clear. It's good, yeah. We can see it. So letter A, the corners, they can be observed using this edge thing. So if we add these two together, we might simply enhance the original image. And image enhancement, it is very very important. So for a moment, let's call this one difference, because this is going to be I test minus I2. So we find this, and then we add difference here. So we just calculate the difference, which is the figure 31, evaluate selection, then we just add this to the edge information, and let's see what is figure 32. Now, in fact, this is such a high quality image, and it is hard to some degree to observe a huge improvement in specific regions. You can try this exercise on your own, and you can try to see. Oh no. Okay, I cannot zoom anymore, but in principle, now this is also a huge image. If there was a low quality image, you might see really something human perception wise improvement to some accepted level. Okay, so now you can, if you prefer, we can give a break for the moment. Do you have any question for so far? So, any questions or?
No, Professor.
Okay.